Alright, so in the previous video I showed how to use a Microsoft form to let people sign up for our escape workshops, and basically during specific windows, whichever is the current workshop, whichever workshop has the current workshop value set to true or checked or yes, that's what's going to be recorded. So if I go and look at so this is our workshops list. Here's our signups list, so I can see I have Peter, Louis, and Andrew all signed up for Costumes and Disguises, which is the current workshop. Now what I want to do is basically set this up to automatically send an email to those attendees the day before the workshop. Now this could be the day before, the day of. I'm going on the day before, so they kind of have a little more heads up, but you might want to do it day of. It's entirely up to you. So to simplify things a little bit, basically give us a little bit of a head start, we're going to use a shortcut. So in SharePoint lists and libraries, any list or library to which you add a date column or date and time column. So in our workshops list here, we have a column called date, which is the date that the workshop is going to be held. We can use that to create what's called a reminder flow. So this is something integrated into SharePoint, makes it very easy to get this up and running. Now what it actually does is sends an email to the person who sets up this reminder flow, which is not what we want. But we're going to basically use it as a way to get the flow created. Then we're just going to change what the flow does a little bit. So basically, to get started, I'm going to go to the Automate menu here, and you'll see there's this Set a Reminder option, and it's picking up any date columns added to the list. So I'll just click on Date, and again, the intent of this is to send a reminder to myself, but that at least will take care of the filtering to the stuff that's coming up. We'll see when we use this, it's going basically using a template, but it's sort of a different kind of integrated template. But it's saying it's going to use these connections, so SharePoint notifications and Office 365 users. That's all great. So I'm just going to click Continue, and I'm going to call it Send Workshop Reminder. And remind me this many days in advance. Now this is where you need to think about whether you want to send it the day before or the day of. I'm going to leave it set to 1, so it'll send it the day before. But again, whatever, you could set it to be 2 days before. It's up to you. So we'll just leave that as 1 and click Create. Now that's immediately going to create the flow and then run that flow, and the flow is going to run, but because there's nothing due tomorrow, there are no workshops where the date is tomorrow, it's not going to find anything, so it's not going to actually send that email. But if I jump over to Power Automate, we can take a look at the flow that it builds, and then we can look at how we can repurpose that for what we want to do. So just waiting for Power Automate to load here. Go into My Flows, and there's my Send Workshop Reminder. Now this is a recurring flow. Basically this flow is going to run every morning and look for any workshop that is tomorrow and send that email. Now running every day is fine. If it doesn't find anything, then that run is going to take a second or two because it's not going to find anything, and then it's going to be done. If it does find something, then it will send the email. But let's just crack it open and see what it actually does. You can see that it ran, and if we look at that run data, we'll see that it ran successfully. And basically what it does is it creates this build table rows, is establishing a variable, a string variable called table rows, and then this days to remind me, and is a compose action that's just taking the number that we entered when we created the flow, and then it's doing a couple extra things here. It's getting my user profile, which we're not really going to need, so I'll probably end up deleting that. And then this scope, and scopes in Power Automate are just a way to kind of chunk actions. So in this case, all of the stuff is happening, all these different actions are happening within this scope. So it's basically calculating today plus X days. So that X days is days to remind me in, and then it's getting the next day. Then it's doing a couple other things, like it's getting the name of the list, and then it's getting items from that list where the, if we expand this, we can see that date is greater than or equal to September 12th and less than or equal to September 13th. So basically, if the date is the 12th, which is tomorrow, then it will return those items. Now, if I look at the output of this get items, we'll see that it returns nothing. Well, it's got a bunch of stuff here, but when I look down at the body and value, which is the data that's being returned, there's nothing, because there's nothing scheduled tomorrow. That's fine. But the point is to just understand that that's how this part works. And we're not going to mess with any of this because it's getting the data. Now, basically from this point on, we do need to think about what we're going to do, because within that condition, the condition is checking, did get items return anything? So if I click edit here, we can look at the condition itself. One of the downsides is you can't really evaluate the formula in the condition from the flow run data. You need to go into the edit mode for the flow. So if we go and look at that condition and expand it, this is a kind of, they're using the old style notation, but if I click edit in basic mode, well, it's too complex apparently for that. So we need to keep it in this advanced mode. But basically it's saying the empty expression is saying if this, undo that. Let me just get out of here so we can, I did something there. Let me go back to edit mode because it wasn't liking the undo. All right, so we were in here in our condition. Basically, it's saying, is the body, so the number of items returned, is that empty? So if nothing is returned, because there's nothing scheduled, then it does nothing. So basically, if this evaluates to true or yes, then it does nothing. If it does return something, then it basically what happens, so what's going to be processed is down here in the no column. I'm actually going to change this around because I don't love conditions that always evaluate to, or that use kind of had the actions in the no. I prefer them to be in the yes. It's just a semantic thing for me. But we're going to delete this condition. And I'm going to show you another way. So if we look at the, basically we're going to use the an expression in here to get the number of items. So we're going to say if, and this is similar to what the original condition was, but it's just a different way of looking at it. I find a little more logical and intuitive. But I'm going to basically say if the length or the number of items is greater than 0, meaning if it returns value, returns an item, then do something. If not, then do nothing. So the way to do that is use the length expression. So in here in the expression tab, I'm going to type in length, open and close parenthesis, then go to dynamic content and select value list of items and click OK. So we're going to say if the length is greater than 0. So again, if there's nothing, it'll go down no. Just to be sure it doesn't do anything, I'm just going to delete these other actions in here, which we don't really need. Delete that. And while I'm at it, I'll send this, could not send a reminder. Also, we'll just delete that. All right. So now basically if it returns an item, it's going to go down yes. If not, it'll go down no. So now in here, we need to take an action. So I'm going to first off get the item ID for the thing that's coming up tomorrow. And this is going to be similar to what I did before with in the previous video where I got all of the got the current items and then just retrieved the one. But basically what I'm going to do here is say, again, get item. And then in here, we will select our SharePoint site, escape planning. The list name is escape workshops. And then the ID, again, is going to be, we're going to use that same expression first, value, and then outside of that, question mark, square bracket, single quote, ID. Okay, so that's going to return that item. Now, again, it's assuming you only have one workshop per date. If you had multiples, then, you know, this could get messy. But for what we're talking about doing, this is going to be fine. So that's going to get that item. Next thing we need to do is get the registrants for that. So let me just rename this just to keep things straight. Get item workshop. And then we'll add another, we're going to add a get items action here. Again, this is plural. So because what we want to do is get the items. So let me just rename this to get items registrants or attendees or whatever you want to call it. I'm just calling it registrants. And again, we're going to go to that same site, escape planning. The list name is escape workshop signups. Now we're going to do that filter query again, but this time we're going to filter on the, whereas before we were filtering on the current workshop, this time we're filtering on workshop ID. And again, because SharePoint will remove the space, the internal column name is workshop capital I, capital D, without any space. I'm going to say is equal to the ID of the get item workshop. So pretty straightforward. Now let's just hit save. And I'm going to monkey with the data a bit here just so we have some data to look at. But I'm going to edit this and pretend that it is running tomorrow instead of on the 15th. So I'll just set that to the 12th so that we can run this flow and see what happens. I'll just click run flow, and just to make sure we're getting the data that we want. So it is running. It succeeded. Let's crack that open and see what it gave us. So we can see, got my profile. Like I said, we're not going to need that, so I can remove it. But the important thing here is that we got the items. It returned the costumes and disguises, which is tomorrow. Perfect. That's what I wanted. And then our condition should have gone down the true branch to get the item workshop and then get the registrants. So if I look at the registrants for this, we can look at the raw outputs. And again, this is kind of an ugly way to look at it, but we can see that there is the body. This is the data being returned. There is Peter Newkirk. And if I scroll down, we'll see Louis, and scroll down farther and we'll see Andrew. So that's the data being returned. Now what I want to do next, in order to send an email to those folks. Now, this is where you need to make a decision. Do you want to send one email to all of them, like BCC'd, so none of them sees one another email address, or do you want to send an individual email to each one of them? It's kind of 6 of one, half dozen of the other, but I tend to prefer to send one email to everyone just to be sure that it's the same one being sent to everyone. With the recipient in the BCC field, just to keep things kind of neat and clean and tidy. So what I'm going to do is we are going to edit this list again. Plus it gives us a chance to play around a little bit more with arrays and with data operations. So what I want to do is go down into our condition here. After our get items registrant's action, we're going to use a select action to get their email addresses. So I think I showed select in the last one. If not, select is a good multi-purpose operation when you want to get basically a subset of an array. Select takes an input and takes an array as input and then produces an array as output, which can be a select, certain columns from that original array. It can be certain values from that original array. It can be certain, those values transformed in some way. But for what I'm going to do right now is we're going to say from the value list of items, I want to return just, now this is kind of a trick because select normally wants you to put in a key and a value, but if I just want the email addresses, I don't want all the other data, I just want the email addresses, I can simply click on the text mode button here, and from that I just want the email. So that's it. That's going to, and I'll just rename this to select emails. And then I can use another data operation. Now you could do this in a compose, but I'm actually going to use join just to kind of demonstrate that this is another good one to use. Basically join is going to take an array of data, and I did show this in the last video as kind of a way to clean up the formatting of those specialties selections. But in this case, I'm going to take the output of these select emails and I'm going to join them with a semicolon, because that's the separator that Outlook and that basically the most mail systems recognize as the separator for multiple email addresses. So I'll just rename this to join emails. Easy enough. Now I can send an email, and again I'm going to use the mail connector, but you can use a different action if you prefer. But we'll just keep this simple, say send an email using, because it's also a little important to be consistent because the original notification they got was from here. So if the reminder was from something else, it might be confusing. Just keep that in mind. Now the 2 is required because I don't want everyone to see one another's email addresses. What I'm going to do is put my own email address in here, which will be Chat Keeley, and in the subject I will just say reminder for workshop, and then in that get item, so I can put it in title here, and again make sure that you are getting the title from the get item workshop action, and then we can in here say, now you're already reminding it, well, we'll put in the date anyway, so we'll just throw in date. And again, get item workshop, date, time, if I could only type, time, again, get item time, and location. Location, there we go. Now the 2 is going to be to me, but I want to BCC the recipient. So basically I want to, in the BCC field, I want to include the output of that join emails. So there it is, join emails, output, and that's it. So let me hit save, and let's actually, before we go out of here, I also want to talk about this recurrence trigger, because when you use that send a reminder trigger or process, it sets it to run at 1500 hours, which is 3 p.m. every day. If we show advanced options, we'll see that that is Pacific time. Maybe that's the time you want, but I would recommend, just for your own sanity, set this to your local time zone. So I'm in the East Coast of the United States, so I'll select Eastern Time, US and Canada, and then I want this to run at, let's say 12 noon. that kind of makes sense. That way, if the workshop is in the is the following day, they're getting at least, if it's, let's say, 8 a.m., they're getting at least 20 hours notice of that workshop. So that's giving them anywhere from 20 to 28 hours of notice for the workshop. But again, you can choose whichever time you want. It could be first thing in the morning, could be late in the afternoon, whatever you want. But it is important to be sure to set this to your local time zone and then whatever hours you want that to fire. So let me hit save. Now we can go back out of here. Once it finishes saving, I can go back out and I can run this flow. Now, one of the nice things about these scheduled flows is you can run them manually just to be sure that the changes you made worked. So if I take a look at this, we'll see that it failed. Why did it fail? Okay. That's because that mail connector is restricted in my tenant. So, all right. I forgot about that. So let me show you another way, another simple way of sending that email. And while I'm at it, I'll get rid of this get my profile because I don't need that. Okay, so I can't use the send an email, although that is, if it is available in your tenant, then that is the cleanest, simplest way to do this. So I'm just going to use the Outlook send email action. So send an email v2. Now, the thing to note about this is that if you, by default, it's going to send from your Outlook mailbox. So the messages will appear to come from you. If you don't want that, then you probably want to use a different action. You may want to use a shared mailbox. If you have a shared mailbox that you can send email from, that's a good, simple way to do it because there's actually a send email from shared mailbox function or action. Otherwise, there are some other ways to do it, but in terms of emailing people outside of your site, so people who don't have access to the site, this, the Outlook actions probably are the best option if you can't use that mail connector option. So let me just put in here, just put myself as the, and I'm just going to copy and paste these values over. So copy, paste, and then copy and paste. And then I need to show advanced options, and in the BCC field, I need to select the join emails output. And then I can delete this action that I know is not going to work. All right. So we can save that. And test it again. Just rerun that last test that or last manual run. And we should see that it goes off normally. So there we go. It got the emails, joined the emails into this nice semicolon separated string and sent the email. And if I look at in my developer tenant here, if I look at my Outlook email, I will see that the message sent because I have it sent to me and then BCC the other folks. And again, this is, BCCing, if you're going to send to multiple people, is probably a good way to go. That way you're not inadvertently divulging other people's email addresses. So if I look in here, just waiting for it to load. Just taking its time. There we go. So it's the date is tomorrow, time 2 p.m., location Barracks 12. So there you go. That is how we can use that reminder flows to take care of the heavy lifting of filtering out what we want to send on, and then retrieve the list of attendees for that workshop using the ID of the workshop, and then send them an email. So there you go. That is all I want to show here. Hopefully this is useful to you, and if you have any questions, problems, throw those in the comments down below.